ఎవరు ఆడియో? నీ ఆడియో కదా? Thanks for joining in for today's episode of Talking Tech. This is our second season, and we are going to learn a lot about the web and related topics from our friends in the industry. For today's episode, we have Mridu Bhatnagar. Yoo-hoo! Mridu is going to be walking us through introduction to APIs with Python. Without any delay, let's get started. Over to you, Mridu.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Mridu Bhatnagar, and our today's session is going to be everything that I can share with you about APIs, about my experience working with APIs in the industry. So I'll just share my screen so that we can just get started right away. Yeah. So moving ahead, our topic is Introduction to REST APIs with Python. I'll be sharing along introduction along with integration of REST APIs. So even if you are hearing about the term REST APIs for the first time, uh, you don't have to worry about it. We'll be starting everything from scratch. So now on the screen that you can see, just focus on the diagram and let go of the definition I did say. And in the diagram, you can see there is one computer and this works as a client. Here is where your web application runs, or from this computer, you send the request. This can even be your mobile. It is not necessary that it needs to be any web application. It can be your mobile as well. And you have your web application running in the browser, suppose. So right now I'm not talking about mobile applications. This is web application running in your browser. And now you are sending a request. And when you send a request, the request hits the API, and this API is present on the web server. And then this web server picks up data from the database, and then whatever you see and then you see the contents on your screen. So you are able to see what you requested for because your web page consists of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and everything is visible to you in your browser. So this is one way. So this is the way the request and response actually works. Imagine a scenario: you go onto your web browser, you in your URL enter google.com. Now this google.com is entered, the request is sent to the server, and then you get the response back. So likewise, there are many more examples of this that we'll be covering up in our next slides. So these things would make it more clear. So where are we using APIs in our everyday life? So in our everyday life, one of the example, now that we are in such a situation in the mid of a pandemic, you must have observed that there are lots and lots of COVID-19 dashboard applications that are being built. And if you would have noticed, or if any of these dashboards has some of these dashboards have explicitly written that we are using so and so API. So what this API is doing is, from the API they are trying to get the data. So for creating the data visualization, we first need a data source, right? There should be something that is sending us the updated data, and that updated data is getting visualized on the dashboard. So that updated data is coming from the APIs. Another example is of an login page. So I'll just show you the login page. Uh, See, I have opened Hacker Earth website. Now this is Hacker Earth. This is their login page, and you can see they are giving us three options. They are telling us you can log in using Facebook, you can log in using GitHub, and the third one is you can log in with Google. So out of these three, you can use any of the methods. Now what this is doing is, they integrated the Facebook's REST API into their system so that people can log in using their Facebook credentials. Here they have integrated GitHub's API so that people can use GitHub credentials, and likewise with the login with Google. So we have all the three options, and APIs I'm saying because for you know for doing backend coding of all these three functionalities, they just had to use the API. There is developer API for all of these, and all they had to do was just use the APIs. And this in return helps the developer because they don't have to reinvent the wheel, they don't have to code everything from scratch and come up with these functionalities. These functionalities are already provided by the platform. All that is required is to do the integration, and this is a very high level integration that gets done. You don't have to actually see the code what Facebook has written and see what code GitHub has written for providing us the login feature. All we have are the APIs. Next example is sorry. Yeah, so the next example is the developer accounts on social media platforms. Now, if you might have observed, when you open facebook.com or twitter.com, they provide us with two options. One option is regular login, another option is that you do a developer login. So there are two options available to you. Sorry, there is a already opened account. Let me show you Twitter. Yeah. So I am on Twitter's homepage at the moment, and you can see that Twitter is providing me an option to sign up and another option to log in. This option is available to every individual, like anyone can go and create the account on Twitter and operate. And now, when you see below, right, when you see below, there are other options it provides, and here it also shows one option as developers. So I just go and click on the developers thing. Now this is a separate account. This is for developers so that they can add the Twitter functionality in their application. Suppose you are doing a project for your college and then you decide that, okay, I am interested in pulling out all the past 7 days tweets from Twitter for a given keyword. And then for such a use case, what you do is a you create a developer account on Twitter and ask Twitter for a developer, like for Twitter API access. So APIs in layman terms is something that provides you a high level overview, and it just provides you the functionality. You are least concerned, or you don't have to be very much concerned of how internally the code is working. At the end of the day, Twitter and Facebook are not going to show us their code, right? So this is one of the examples of APIs. And then another example is the chatbot. So you must have observed that when you go on various platforms, suppose you go and check any company's website, and mostly on the right hand side there is a small pop up that says, "Welcome to our customer support. How may I help you?" So these chatbots, if you see, a lot of companies built their own. So a lot of companies have them inbuilt, and also there are a set of companies that integrate an API to get the chatbot functionality. So in those, the ones that do API integration for the chatbot, you would observe that there is a line written powered by and a different company's name. So there is a possibility that you are actually seeing some different company's website, but on the chatbot you might be seeing that powered by followed by name of a different company. Yeah. So all these examples are something that you can try it out on your own. At the moment, I don't really have a live example for the chatbot functionality, as I don't remember which is that company which is using that feature, but I had seen it. So once you can also just explore the website and find it out. So, are there any doubts up till now? Something that is not understood? Okay, so we'll just be moving ahead, or something that I haven't explained in detail, or should I go over again? Is there anything of this sort? Okay. So I'll just be moving ahead with the types of APIs. So APIs can be divided into different categories based on accessibility and their architectural style. And also it can, like, architectural style, I'll not be going in too much into details of another APIs. All we are going to talk about today is REST APIs, and that also the practical aspects of the REST API and not the theoretical things. And another is based on accessibility. So based on accessibility, you can say there are two types of APIs. One API is public APIs, and the another API is private API. Now, what is meant by a public API? So, public APIs are basically external APIs. This is something that companies have provided on their own. So, they want you to use their functionality and they are providing the APIs. Like GitHub, like dev.to, if you have gone on their website for writing blogs. Public API is again available by Facebook and Twitter, as we had discussed. Instagram has its own API. So all these examples are of public APIs. And now that everyone is onto Zoom, is using Zoom, Zoom has its own API. Google Gmail provides it their own API. So all these examples are of public API. You can just create a developer account, request the company for access, and provide. And also for requesting access, you need to provide them a valid reason that why, that how are you going to use their API. So these folks need to also make sure that the APIs are not being misused for any wrongdoings. So all these things need to be done. And an example of private API is, suppose you work in a company and internally, like everyone works in the team, right? So inside of a team, you need to collaborate with people. Everything is unlike what we do in our usual college days. It is not that a single person writes the, completes the whole project and then submits it. So in a company, everyone is getting paid, so everyone has to work. So suppose there are two developers, developer A and developer B. Now developer A has created its own API and developer B has its own API. Now how do these both two APIs on different system communicate with each other? So in such cases, these private APIs are developed, which are internally used by the company. You don't have to show it to a person of another company. You don't have to show it to a friend that this is the API that I have written. All these things, as the name suggests, are private. So anything that is done internally for the people of the company can be assumed as private, and public are public APIs that your friend can also use, or anyone can use rather. So I hope these examples make it more clear that what kind of classification here we are trying to do. Next is based on the architectural style. Now, SOAP and GraphQL can make it a bit confusing. So here is how the development happened. Initially, SOAP APIs came into existence. Now, when it all started, so SOAP APIs came for the communication that takes communication between two systems, or you can say for getting an XML response, we had SOAP APIs, and SOAP APIs had a different kind of format, that how a request and response can be sent. Then came REST APIs, and REST APIs had was an architect is an architectural pattern, and it has their own way in which the server and the client can communicate with each other. And what happens in REST APIs is, suppose I am querying a system and I am interested in getting the customer data. So assume it that you have created an account on GitHub and you are trying to ask GitHub that can you just tell me the details of my account. And now, when you ask GitHub for the details of your account, you are interested in only asking for the name. You want that, can you tell my username? But when you are using GitHub REST API, what GitHub does is it would return 10, 15 more things along with your username. So I am asking for Mridu Bhatnagar, but it would also tell me that these are your total number of repositories, these are your latest commits, this is what you have done so far. So there are a lot of information that the REST API gives. But what happens in GraphQL API? What GraphQL API does is when you ask the API for your name, the GraphQL API returns you your name. It doesn't give any more information. So GraphQL is a bit more advanced version, you can see. And GraphQL is a query language kind of. It is not an architectural style. So these are the differences, and all the jargons that I used unknowingly on this slide, I'll be demystifying it later, and we'll be covering what is the meaning of each and every term that I had used. Now, any doubts so far on this slide? Okay. So, if you are along with us and viewing the session, you can just ask your questions in the chat bot, in the link that we have shared with you, and then I'll be taking up those questions, and I'll be answering those. So, if there are any doubts, just put it on the link. So moving ahead, we have now what I meant by REST APIs. So REST APIs has their own features, and there are a set of things that are most common to REST APIs. And REST basically stands for representational state transfer. These are basically set of rules that developers follow when they create an API. So at the moment, we are not discussing how to create the API part and what are the rules. That is not the agenda for the talk. What I am discussing would be how to integrate the external APIs. So for the creation part, there is lot of background knowledge that is needed. So we will not be going into that. And one of these rules is you should be able to get a piece of data when you link to a specific URL. So let us see an example of the last point that I'm sharing. This is an example of a GitHub API. All I did was I entered in my browser api.github.com, and when, as the point says, the URL should link data attached. There should be data attached to the URL, linked to the URL. So whenever a user enters the URL, some data is getting returned. So this is a perfect example of that case. We have a URL, and here is the data that is attached to the URL. Now, when I'm just doing api.github.com, what this data is telling me is if you are the current user URL, if you have to check the user profile, this is the URL that you can use. https api.github.com and then user. So let us see what is it. Okay, so it is not giving us the access because it expects that we are authenticated. Somehow my name is also not coming. But uh, just a second, I'll try with another. And so whenever you are working with APIs, you need to first have a look at the documentation. What is the URL that it accepts? Just a second. If you want to check the GitHub API and what URLs are possible and what URLs we can use, so you can just check out the GitHub REST API documentation, and it tells us everything that how these API needs to be used. So The URL here is http://api.github.com users octocad orgs. So this is how this is like all the API documentations are beautifully written, and any doubt you can just consult the documentation. So this was one example of the APIs part that I was discussing. So any REST API should have some data attached to the URL link. Now integration. So as the name suggests, integration means we are trying to integrate two different systems. So you have a client and you have a server. We are trying to link both of them. Client is sending request to the server and the server is responding back with the response. So it is just like question and answer. I am asking a question to you and you are responding me back with your answer. So analogy to this is just like a question and answer system. Someone is asking you the question and other responds back with an answer. So you can imagine that the client is asking the question to the server and the server, it's the duty of the server to reply back and give the response back to the client. And we are saying it integration because we are trying to create a system, we are trying to integrate two separate systems with our API. And another example of this could be I am writing my program and I am writing my program and I am interested in using Twitter's API to pull all the latest tweets. Now, what I have to do, I would just integrate Twitter's API in my code. So, this is one case of integration. Any doubts up till here? You can ask the questions in the link if there are any. Am I going too fast, too slow? Any response on that? So next is request and response, as these were the two jargons that I used in my current slide. So now we'll be talking about what is meant by when I say request and what is meant by saying response. So here is a basic structure. Your request consists of a URL and then it consists of a method. Then there are then there are list of all the headers that are present, and then you send some data. You are requesting something to the server, you send something to the something that is your data. So now example is your URL is something like api.github.com. Now what is the difference? When you do github.com, it takes you to the website. Now website, that whole website is not your API. API is different. That's why the URL is api.github.com. Both the URLs are different. And then your github.com returns you the complete website. But here I am interested in getting only a very specific information from the website. So all I am interested in is I am interested in pulling the data. Another difference is these APIs are something that are meant for the developers, as we developers can understand this. And these are not meant for any common person who is just going and browsing on github.com. So that is where the difference lies. These APIs are not your websites. We are just trying to pull out the data. So this is your URL. How will you get the data or how you will create something else? All these functionalities are done by the methods get, put, post, delete. And then there has to be a common language for communication between the client and the server. Now, what I mean by this, let us discuss with an analogy. Suppose you and your friend are talking over the phone, and then as you are talking over the phone, you must, like, you all know that we must follow some phone etiquettes. Now, what do I mean by phone etiquettes? It is that when your friend is speaking, you keep quiet. When you are speaking, your friend keeps quiet. And this is so that we both are able to understand each other's language and make sense out of it. If you and me both together start speaking at the same time, then none of us would be able to understand the language, and as a result we won't be able to communicate. Same happens with your APIs and computer. They want to communicate with each other, and for communication there has to be a common language. Now, how does the server know that what the client is sending? So for that purpose, we need a list of headers. So your headers would be user agent, language, encoding, and similar things. Languages, I'll be telling up later that what each of these means. So here is an example of request headers. Request headers are something that you don't have to explicitly create on your own. These get created on its own from the browser when the request is getting sent. So here is a sample request. The sample request here, it is saying that the host is developer.mozilla.org. Then what is the user agent? So user agent is basically your browser that you are using. So here we were using Firefox. Then you have language. So language communication is English. So it is EN and then followed by a US. And then when the request and response cycle takes place, the connection needs to be kept alive. So you can just search on your own and check out that what each of these other keys stand for. So this is the way of request, how the request gets sent to the server. Okay. Okay, so for GitHub APIs, it is unlike Twitter. You don't have to ask for the permission and everything. All you need to do is just check out. Just I am just showing on my screen. I think it should be visible. Uh, so I go on the my github.com screen, and then I am just trying to find out where is the API. When you go in the when you scroll down to the bottom of github.com, you will see a developer API option. And then when you see the developer API, you have all the options. See, it is showing here REST API. How can I test the APIs out of browser? So one way of doing it out of browser is using a client. So using a client, as in you can use something like Postman. Postman is a tool, if you haven't heard of it. Postman is a tool made by folks from India itself. That's a India-based startup, and they have a very nice client where you can just test your APIs. So, like you put your URLs in the browser in the search box here. Instead of that, all you have to do is put your links in that Postman client. So I don't have that Postman client installed on my system, but I can show you that as well. Just a second. This is very easy to use. All you have to do is just specify what method you are using. It looks something like this. Is this visible to you? Yeah. So all you have to do is go onto the Postman website, and then once you go to the Postman website, it will ask you to download the client. All you have to do is download the client based on the operating system that you are using, and then you can just this is the search box. Here, all what you do is you enter your URL, and then you go on enter the URL. You select the method, whether you are sending a GET request, POST request, and then you hit search. Uh, so now it will return you this data. So everything that you are seeing in the browser using this data will be shown in your Postman client. So there is one named as Postman. There is another if you are into open source and want to check out the open source alternative. The one that I have heard of and not used is Postwoman. And recently I came across the link that its name has got changed. So you will need to search for it. What client is it. So all these options provide you an option to test outside of your browser. I hope that answers the question. REST, between REST API and Graph API, like REST API and GraphQL API, this highly depends on the use case that you are trying to solve, that you have in your hand. So mostly in the industry, so far we were using REST APIs. At the moment, REST APIs exist, but slowly, in some particular use cases, we are moving on to GraphQL APIs. The benefit of using GraphQL API is that it improves the performance to some extent, as it does not return any unnecessary data. It just gives you what you ask for. So both of them are used, and everything is use case dependent. And in software, deciding the technology, everything has its own trade offs. So there is not one size fits all kind of an answer to it. Yeah, so we can create our own APIs. Sorry, I didn't get the last part. And use it free. And is it free? Yeah, so you can create your own APIs definitely, but you will have to, like, suppose I am creating my own API and I am sending some data in it. I have some data in it, and I want to, make it public and tell everyone that, okay, I have created one API and now everyone can use it. For this kind of a setup, first you need to host that API somewhere. You need to deploy that API somewhere. Without that, no one would be able to access your API. Why I'm saying so? Because when you are trying and when you create your API, you can test it on localhost. That is your system. Now, on your local host, the limitation is only the person who is able to access your computer can use that localhost thing. Not each of your friends would be able to do it, right? So, in such a case, you will have to deploy your API to a platform like Heroku. Now, what Heroku would do is it will give you, instead of your local host, it will provide you a Heroku URL and then followed by your API endpoint. So, without deploying it to another server, it is not possible for others to access your API. I hope that answers the question. On which software we create our work on APIs. What Okay. So for writing APIs, there is no particular software that we use. For writing APIs, all you need to have is the knowledge of one language and one framework. That is sufficient to create the APIs. Now, if you are a Python person, a good way to start would be using Python and the minimalistic micro framework named as Flask. Flask provides you with the functionality to create API endpoints, and you can just easily create the API endpoints and use it on your own. Even you can use your own API endpoint. So if suppose if you are a full stack developer, and usually what happens is the backend person and the front end person communicate with the APIs. Backend person sends some data to the front end person, and that is how that communication takes place using JSON. Now, what is JSON? We'll be covering in the next slide. So this is how the communication takes place. But if you are a full stack developer, all these things can be done by you. So you yourself can create the API, you yourself can consume the API. And no external software is not needed for that. External software we are using only for testing the API. Other part is only using the language and the framework. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. We are not going to discuss about how to create the APIs, but you can search. Yeah, you can search online that How do we create APIs and what are the rules for it? So first check the rules. Creating APIs is not a difficult task to do, but just check for the rules, that what all things you have to keep in mind while you create the URLs. So all only this knowledge is needed. So you can just check out the rules for creating the REST API on the web. So right now we are just talking about integration. And the knowledge that you gain from here would also be beneficial when you create your own APIs. So before, like, creating APIs is obviously exciting, but just like have the fundamentals in mind. So now we'll be moving ahead with HTTP methods. What are these methods? So again, let us go by the examples, as examples are, there is nothing better than examples to understand a concept. So here is the use case. What is meant by the GET request? Imagine you enter a you enter a pizza shop. Let us think that we are going in Domino's. Obviously, we are not going, as each of us is inside our homes. So you just have to imagine you enter a Domino's pizza shop and you go to the person there on the counter and you ask him that, can you please provide me with the menu card? Now the person on the other end provides you with the menu card. Now this procedure, this thing is a GET request call. How is it a GET request call? You are asking him for the menu card, and the menu card has each and every pizza that Domino's is serving. So GET request in systems is also the same. You are asking your API to return you all the customer data, or in this example, you are asking your API to return all the available pizzas. So that is a GET request call. Get is getting. I am only getting. I am not interested in anything else. All I am interested in seeing is what all pizzas are there for me. So this is a simplest of the examples, and this is of GET request call. Also remember, GET request call is a call that can be tested in the browser. So this is your GET request call. Now moving ahead to POST request call. What happened now was, I was very keen on eating that pizza now that I already saw the menu card. I figured out that okay, I am interested in eating a cheese pizza. I ordered him cheese pizza, and I just told him the toppings, and I excitedly told that the crust has to be thin crust and my pizza is having this, that. You create a order. Now this creating an order for you, that guy will create a new order. Creating needs to be remembered with post. Whenever you are trying to create anything, that is post request. Post means create. Example of this can be, you go on a completely new platform where you have never registered before. You are trying to sign up. When you sign up, in their database, a new entry is getting created. Insertion takes place. So now when the insertion takes place, so a new entry is getting created. So all this process is again a post request call. Post means creating anything. And this post request is not visible to you because all of this is happening at the backend. This is a post request call. Next, we move on to put. Now, what happened? Out of excitement, I did tell uh, the person at the other end that I am interested in a thin crust cheese pizza. But then I was still going through my menu card and I came up with the farmhouse pizza. I just saw that farmhouse is also written on it. What I did was, instead of canceling the order, I just told them that you have already placed my order. Can you just update it with these and these things? And I just got my pizza updated from, suppose, Margherita to farmhouse. Now, this is an example of put. Put means you are trying to update something. Remember, post and put are different. In post, we were creating. Put is when you have already created something. So these are the analogies to understand that what each of these methods mean. Last is delete. Now in the delete case, what happened was, out of excitement, I did order everything that I could, and then I realized that this is probably not the very good time or the right time to have a pizza, and I must control myself and not have it now. And then I again go to that person and ask them that, can you please cancel the order? Now, what cancellation is, it is deleting something. I no more want what I had asked for. So this is the delete method. Are there any questions in this? Moving ahead, we will be discussing about the structure of an HTTP response. I think I have missed out telling what is HTTP. So HTTP is basically the protocol. The phone example that I was sharing with you, like on phone there are phone etiquettes. HTTP is basically the protocol that client and server follow when they communicate with each other. On this slide, we will be discussing about the response. So your response contains a status code, then you have headers, and then there is body. Body is basically we are sending the data back to the client. Now there are various status codes. Status codes are nothing but numbers having a meaning attached to it. So what 200 stands for, it stands for successful. It stands for okay. The communication has successfully taken place. What 500 stands for, it stands for there is an internal server error. Now client is requesting something to the server and the server is unable to respond. The error then returned is 500. Now another error is 404. 404 is not found. What not found means is that you are requesting for something that doesn't exist on the server. So then you get a 404. Headers. Headers are same as what we were seeing in the request, that there are certain kinds of header that tell us about the user agent, content type, and things like that. Then we have a body that is basically the response that we are trying to send back to the client. Now here is an interesting example. If you are on your laptops, you can also check it out. But if not, you can just follow me along. We will see what this does. All I am doing is, this is an API URL. Someone has created an API on their own, and that is the URL or this API. So all I have to do is send get request call on this API. See, the URL is https double slash then http.cat slash, then we are sending the status code. Now, what this API does is, it is very simple. It just returns you a cute cat picture along with the meaning corresponding to the status code. 200 means okay. Your client is working fine, your server is also working fine, and the communication has successfully taken place. That is 200. Now, what does 404 stands for? So, 404 is not found. See, 404 is not found, and then here is a very relevant picture that cat is hiding herself in between all the papers around. So, likewise, when you are requesting something and that is not found, that is not available anywhere, that is 404. Then you have 500, and 500 is basically internal server error. Suppose you are trying to get the data from any of the external APIs and returns 500. That means the problem is at their end. So whichever API you are calling, that API has some fault in it, and that's why the response return is 500. These responses are conventional and are standard responses. You should not try to change the meaning of the responses when the change the meaning of the responses. So this is a standard convention that is followed across industry so that everyone understands it. Now you don't do it like you are sending a status code of 500 and sending meaning as okay, everything has successfully worked. What this is going to do is, this will create confusion. So you have to follow the convention. And there are many such status code, like there is 500, there is 502, that is bad gateway, and you can see a very relevant image, that is 504 is gateway timed out. Gateway timed out, the place where I actually observed was on Quora, the Quora website that has a lot of questions and answer. So a lot of times it happened that I used to go on Quora and it used to return to me that sorry, gateway timed out, error 504. So these are the some of the interesting use cases, and here I have just for your but experimentation purpose written some of the status code that you can check out on your own. Any doubts so far? Yeah. So if you are trying to, depends on where are you creating the API. Like I am not a front end person, so I am not very sure how things happen on the front end with regards to API. But the amount of front end that I have done, I think all the JavaScript errors that come are visible to you on the console. Likewise, on the backend, when you do things with Python or any other language, that error you would be able to identify as your code will start breaking, and then you have to log your code. By log, I means inside of your code snippet, you will have to write statements that tell you where the code has failed or where the code is going to fail. So that is known as logging. It helps you in identifying where your code has got broken. So this is just normal, like calling any kind of function, like normal function call. When someone calls your API, your function will get executed. Whatever function is written below your API endpoint, that time your normal function will get executed and you will be able to know that something has failed. And while creating, it is on you to structure your code in a way that you are sending back the error 500 so that your client knows that something is wrong with the API. Does that answer the question? All right. So now we have covered quite a lot of things, that what is an API, what are REST APIs, we have discussed what is GraphQL, then we talked about HTTP, then we discussed response request, what each of these response requests consists of. Now, next is the response header. So, as you can see, there is some similarity between request and response headers, but the crux of everything is the headers. What they are trying to do is they are helping the client and the server to understand that how things should communicate, or they are telling a more information about the request that is coming. Likewise, when we have response headers are basically these things that are trying to send all kinds of information regarding the response to the client. And what if you are interested in understanding the meaning of each of these keys, all you have to do is just do the search. However, these we don't add explicitly when we are writing code. This is something that is automatically added on its own. So this is just a good to have knowledge. And then we have various kinds of data formats. So if you are a front end person, you would have known what is HTML, or HTML is rather something that everybody knows. So HTML response is there, then there is JSON response, and then there is XML response. So the example of HTML response is you go on to any website, suppose I am on Twitter website, and then I click on inspect, or rather not on okay. So now on your like now what is visible to you is an HTML. It is written doc type HTML. This also has lot of other things inside of it, but the basic thing is HTML. HTML provides structure to your code. Or you can rather go on view page source, so things are more clearly visible here, and you will see the HTML. Now, next data format that I told was JSON. So JSON is nothing but just like a Python dictionary or here everything is a key value pair. So example of JSON response is this: I have a key with me and I have a value. This is the JSON response. So basically, when your server is sending the data to the client, it can send the data in this format. And now it is on the developer to parse this response and get whatever is needed. And now next is XML response. So XML looks something like this. This is a very short example of how XML looks. These days XML is used, but XML is not very frequently used. Mostly communication is JSON response. So is using JSONs. So XML is looks something of this sort. It first tells that okay, this we are using XML version this, and encoding is in UTF-8 format, and then there are keys. So you have response as one key, and then there is this another key. So basic structure of the XML looks like this. These things are not changed. So in the sample here, you can see response and say, depending on what you are requesting, these things can change. However, every XML response would start with XML version and encoding, such kind of things. Next topic is, if you are into Python, then in Python, how to integrate these external APIs that I am talking about. So it is on you to keep playing with the code, experiment it. There are lots and lots of interesting APIs present out there. And here it is. What I am doing is I am using two external libraries. Sorry, one external libraries, and JSON is built-in library in Python. So I did a pip install requests. Now this pip install requests, what it does is it is an HTTP library. It helps me in communicating with the APIs, the client and server communication. All I am doing is doing request.get. By get here, it means that get method. When I do this, it returns me a response. Now, this response is an response object. I have to get text out of it, so I'll be doing response.text. And as text is in string format, so I'll be converting it to a parsable format using loads, JSON.loads. So now all the data that you were seeing in the browser here, this data will be in my, when I am doing it through the code, this data is present in the API response. Okay, and now as our communication has already taken place, if you are interested in knowing the status code, all you have to do is response.status code. As response is an object, so response has various attributes and methods attached to it, like we did response.text, response.status code. So this is one way of integrating the API. Not now, moving ahead, what you can do, you can just check out the documentation of any of the APIs and build your own project out of it, integrate the APIs, play around with your APIs. These are the things that can be done moving ahead. And here are some of the APIs nowadays that we have a lot of communication platforms. You have Telegram API, Slack, Twitter, Facebook, lots of APIs are there. And all these APIs are free. You don't have to go and purchase anything. And through the APIs, there is an interesting project that I did. So what I did was I created this WhatsApp chatbot. Now, what this WhatsApp chatbot does is when I query it using the meaning, when I query it, it returns to me the meaning. It gives me synonyms, antonyms, and examples. So, as you can see here, antonyms are present. Antonyms return me the antonyms of the given word. So this is an example. For building this, I was using Twilio's API. So Twilio API is free. So you can check out the Twilio API for WhatsApp. All that I used for this project is the Twilio API request module. And for getting the data, so there has to be something that returns me this word data. So for getting the word data, I was using the Merriam-Webster's API. So that returned me this meaning, synonym, antonym, and here is the interesting fun project that I did over a weekend. If you are interested in exploring this project, there is a blog that I have written, so I can share the URL along with it, along with my presentation. So that was all I had. Thank you. Any questions? No questions? Okay. Are there any questions? You can ask your questions in the link that we have provided you, and I'll be answering it. And that this was all that I had for the presentation today. So if there is anything that you want to ask, you can ask it out here. Okay, so there are no as such specific prerequisites for creating the chatbot, but all you need to know is what we discussed in the session today. So we talked about what are REST APIs, how to integrate the REST APIs. In the chatbot, all I am doing is integrating Twilio's API and I am integrating Merriam-Webster's API. And all, okay. And also regarding the information that how to use the APIs. So each of the companies provide a very good documentation of these APIs. So you just have to browse through the API documentation. That is all that is needed, and you will be able to find out the answers. Apart from that, regarding how the querying is done, those are the logics that I had written on my own, that how the like what kind of request the user is sending, what kind of response the API should send, all the formatting and styling of the response. These are the things that I had created and logic written the logic on my own. So that is not what the API is written. uh, like mostly I code in Python. Like I enjoy coding in Python, so majority of my projects work, everything revolves around Python. So as such, there is no language biased or language preference. You can code in any language of your choice, which you are comfortable with. So these things are can be built in any language. There is no nothing specific to the language here. Okay. So, if there are any more questions and if you come up with something else post the session, so you can ask me out on Twitter. I am there on Twitter, and you can ping and ask if there is any question that you have. So it is at the rate Mridu followed by double underscore. I mean, there is no traditional way for starting with the APIs. All you have to do is maybe again, if you found the session to be interesting, you can again go through the slides of the session and then try. You just don't start out by creating directly a chatbot. You will get confused with it. Chatbot is something that I recently developed, and it has been quite some time since the time that I am doing working with APIs. For starting out, just do small projects with the APIs. Like you can just explore the GitHub API, find out that how you can fetch your projects that you have worked with, find out your pinned repositories from GitHub. So just for the starting point, I think GitHub API is a good use case. Is something that is good to use. GitHub has GraphQL APIs as well as REST APIs. So for the time being, just explore the REST API because GraphQL is a bit confusing. So this can be a good starting point. I mean, this there is like I don't really know about the future things, how things would be going. But working in the industry, something that has come to my observation is uh, web development and web applications is something that we are always going to use, and we keep on frequently using it. So you think of any problem around you that you are trying to solve with technology, the zeroth step of solving that problem is you built your own platform, and then through that platform people are trying to solve the problem. Even if there are companies like Swiggy and Uber. So Uber for the travel thing, Swiggy for ordering your food, even though they are into operations and they are trying to they do home delivery, but even for this purpose they have built their own platform, that is the web based application. So web development is web applications are something that each of us needs to use. And even when you are creating your own project, suppose I am very much interested in creating something on my own, that is also the point of time that I can just create a web application and use it. Now, what happens with machine learning is I am not into machine learning, first of all. And the second thing is based on my observation. I don't have an experience in machine learning, but this is what my observation says that machine learning, one part of machine learning is prediction. Also, machine learning at an industry level requires a very niche use case. Companies need to have a use case where they are trying to implement machine learning, where they are trying to use machine learning. We are maybe academically machine learning, we have gone very high that okay, these are the things, and everyone is doing that Kaggle data sets and figuring out something of the machine learning. But at the crux, like everyone needs to know programming. Even though you are trying to enter machine learning, programming is something that programming applications or programming for that sort is something that everyone needs. And future of it depends highly on what startups come up, what ideas do people come up. If there is a niche use case, then we definitely use machine learning. But lot of problems are, lot of everyday problems are solved using these web application kind of things. Okay, so this is probably going to be the last question, and the seems like everyone has seen the buzz around GPT-3 and what came on Twitter. So, honest answer is I did see it, and for a while I was also scared thinking of the future that whether the coding thing is going to stay or all of it is going to go away. But like I had just seen those demos. I haven't gone into the API, I haven't checked anything about the API, and purposefully I am not doing this because all of this would induce unnecessary anxiety which is not needed at the moment. There are a lot of other things to deal with in life than GPT-3. So might sound very weird, but that is really an honest answer that it is exciting to look at the prospects of it. Lot of people are building lot of uh, interesting stuff, but as long as that is not personally hitting us, we can keep up with our own things.
Okay, thank you so much, Mridu, for taking that questions and taking out your time for telling us about APIs and stuff. We are so sorry about about the stream. Like we couldn't enable the live chat. If you have any questions, please do contact Mridu, and also you can put up the questions in the comments. Thank you so much.
Okay.